Beginning card Daf, we set this Eruvin Daf Nun Aleph. We begin on the bottom of Nun and Beis, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Aleph. We continue to explain the halacha by Mishnah regarding someone that's on the road and it's getting dark, and he says he wants a shvisa to be beneath the tree. What's the halacha regarding when he does define that? Ashris corresponds with Chassid and Chesed or any time Daf Chaim. Bishanim was joining us for today's Daf. Some of the things we're discussing in today's Daf are this halacha of the Mishnah, where someone's on the derech, it's getting dark, and he sees it's about to be shkia, he's about to acquire his shvisa. He sees he's 4,000 amos away from his house, but he sees that a tree that he recognizes, he says, I want shvisa to be ikarai, to be by the trunk of the tree, which he is within 2,000 amos of that, and he's defining exactly where it should be by the trunk, and then he could go another 2,000 amos until he gets to his house. In today's Daf, we also explained the halacha in the Mishnah that we said that we define the 2,000 amos that a person gets is that with a radius of 2,000 amos, diameter of 2,000 amos, and is it circular or is it going to be in a square? Which obviously then, if you have the circle, you're getting 2,000 amos everywhere. If you make it as a square, you're actually getting more than 2,000 amos in one direction. We actually see there's practical implications for the halachas in general of how we measure measurements. Then, for the second half of the daf, a little bit complicated of a cheshbon, but there's 3 different types of Eruvin that a person can make. You can make it with bread. It's not really necessarily bread. It's any type of food, but it's 2 meals worth of food. Or mekaimi with your legs where you are, or makam plaini, which is not even with your legs, with your speech, to be in a different place. Those are 3 different types of Eruvin. We're going to see a machlekes amaron, how to qualify the machlekes we have in our Mishnah. In terms of concept we have in today's daf is Rabbi Yossi, that where you have a story that someone wanted to say that the brisa was Rabbi Yossi because we pass him and rule like Rabbi Yossi because he always has his reasoning with him. And the halacha of Zuhi Shiva Zuhi B, which you mentioned many times in Shas, that it says V'shava kohen and Vaha kohen, when the kohen comes to check out the house that has a nega, although one says coming back, one says coming, different words, but they mean the same thing, so therefore it has the same halacha. Begin the current daf. Daf Nun Amud Beis, 2 lines out of the bottom of the Amud. The Mishnah said, Omar, it's getting dark, someone sees he's more than 2,000 amos away from his house, but he says, I recognize that tree, that I'm within 2,000 amos of that tree, and that tree itself is within 2,000 amos of the house, shvisa be ikari. And here, unlike the first case that we discussed in the previous daf of Tachtav, which you don't know exactly where he was saying, he defined exactly, I want to be by the trunk of the tree. So then, as we said in the Mishnah, so after Shabbos starts where he can go from where he's standing up until the tree 2,000 amos, and then from the tree to his house 2,000 amos. Nimsa comes out when it's dark, he's walking home 4,000 amos because he made his shvisa by saying it by the trunk of the tree. Now we continue on top of the now. Says the Gemara Amar Rav. He says this is the Mishnah, that if a person defines exactly when he says that I want my shvisa to be ikar by the trunk, there's a limitation. But it's only if he would run, he would be able to get to the tree before it gets dark. That's where his speech is effective, and then if he acquires it, then he could go from the tree slowly home. If he ran to the tree, he'd be able to get it before Shabbos. What do you mean? The Mishnah said, it's a red tinkle, it's getting dark, he doesn't have time. That says Rav, he says it was getting dark that he wouldn't have enough time to get home even if he ran. But to get to the trunk of the tree, also he would be able to go if he ran, and therefore it's going to be considered as a valid Eruv. As long as if he was able to run, he would be able to be there, then we could view you as if you are there, and even though you wouldn't be able to get home. Ikidam, those say a slightly different version. Rava says, you're right. It's telling us that it's getting dark, and he wouldn't be able to even get to the tree like Abayat asked him. But that's saying it's only Kimaski Kalikali. He wouldn't be able to get to the tree if he went slowly. But if he would run, he would be able to get there. So again, different ways of answering the question, but the idea is still Rava holds, you have to be able to get there. If you ran, you'd be able to get there, then that could be your Eruv, even though you're not running.
If he's there, the ones you have to say.
He's not there. He's not there. It's 2,000 amos away, it's going to happen in another 2 minutes. And
he's going to be there anyways.
He's not going to be there. If he ran, he'd be there. He's not going to be there. Now he's going to go stop. What?
It's not, he's saying it's not good.
Yeah, if he wouldn't be able to get there, we can't view you as if your shvisa is over there, which in Bichlal, we're going to see that there's a whole chiddush to say that shvisa be kari, but more complaining is going to be my shvisa. I mean, you're not there. You're not there with your foot. You're not there with your food. So how do we view you as if you're there? So says Rabbi, if you could run and be able to get there, we could view you as if you're over there. But then even if you don't run, it's okay. But as long as you could have ran, you'd be able to get there. Now the Gemara brings a story related to this halacha. Not specifically this halacha, but regarding the halacha of a brayso in the previous daf. Rabbi Yossi have a kazi baruch. They were going on the road. Rabbi says, Rabbi Yosef, Teshvisa, saying Tusi Diklo, let our Shvisa be, meaning not where we're standing, but let it be beneath the palm tree, the Savlachur, which literally means to say that it supports its brother, which means to say it's a tree that another tree leans on it. Some say he said Tusi Diklo beneath the palm tree, the Parak Mori Mecharka, that redeems its owner from taxes, meaning it produces so much fruit that he sells it and he pays his taxes, like people have people in the basement so they can pay the property taxes. This is the tree that he pays taxes with this tree. But be it as it may, he was just pointing at a certain tree that was within 2,000 amas. Let that be our shvisa. Yodali Mar, does the master know which tree I'm talking about? He says, I don't know which tree, I don't recognize which tree you're talking about, so that we could, it's Shabbos in 2 minutes. I don't know the tree that you're talking about. Somebody says, don't worry, Samachalai, rely on me. I know the tree, and you could come on to me because I'll do it with you. Then like with the Bryson. He quoted him a Bryson, he says, if there were two people, we said this Bryson in the previous stuff. One guy recognizes, one guy doesn't recognize. The guy who doesn't recognize gives it over to the guy who recognizes, and he says, let my shvisa be with you. And the Zeshemako imitation for something, the guy who recognizes says, let our shvisa be in that place. Says the Gemara, this that he told him, this Bryce name of Rabbi Yossi, it's actually not true. The Bryce was not told the name of Rabbi Yossi. It was an anonymous Bryce. Like Rabbi Yossi, wasn't told like Rabbi Yossi. He only wanted him to accept from him this halacha, and that's why he said the name of Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi, his reasoning is always with him, as the Gemara says in Gittin of Salazar Manav, and it talks about the praise of different sages. So Rabbi Yossi Nimuka Imay, which actually Rashi makes another interpretation. Nimuka could be the words nim and kav. Means to say he has straight like a kava mashkelis, which is like a tool of when they measure exact lines, they use certain tools with a weight hanging down of measurements. That's how straight it is. He has logic and straight like an arrow. So that's nimuka, nim, and kav. That's the word nimuka. But be that as it may, he called him in the name of Rabbi Yossi because he wanted to accept it. But really, it's not really a brayso from Rabbi Yossi. We continued to look in the Mishnah. We said emeina makar. Let's say the guy doesn't recognize. We said in the Mishnah, we said it's getting dark and the guy wants to get home. So he sees a tree or he sees a wall, so he says, let it be my shvisa over there, then he can get home. But let's say the Mishnah doesn't recognize any place. He's not so professional, he doesn't realize you can make an eruv in a place where you're not. So then he says, let my shvisa be where I am right now. So the Mishnah says, okay, he acquires 2,000 amas in this place. Says the Gemara, Hani al Payim Amma Hechim, where does it say in the Torah that 2,000 amas of a tchum, that in general, it's the question, what do we know the 2,000 amas? Which is a guy where he is, Basha Husham, that he gets 2,000 amas in every direction. Says the Gemara, like learn the Brisa. Says in the pasuk in Shemais, Shvu ish tachta. Let every man stay beneath where he is. So we taught this already in the previous daf. Elo arba amas. Someone who goes out of the tchum, who doesn't have any tchum at all, he's tachta, which is the body of the person is 3 amas, together with another amas to stretch his arms. That's daled amas. Then the pasuk says, Al yeti ish mimukayim, a person should not leave his place. Elo apayim amas. That refers to the 2,000 amas a person gets. Now says the Gemara, no. Where do you see from al yeti ish mimukayim? From the word mukayim, how do you see 2,000 amas? Some of his, it's a very elongated gzeir shava, but lamanu, as the pictures show you, as I'll be saying it, lamanu, we learn gzeir shava makom mimakim, umakim min nisa. Meaning, there's a pasuk that says makom, but doesn't say nisa, which is our pasuk. Al yitish mukayim says the word makom, doesn't say the word of nisa, of run. Now, we learn it out from a different pasuk that says makom and nisa. So, Ayitish Mukayim, we're learning from the pasuk V'samti l'chamakim asher yonas shama. Now, just like over there, it says Nisa, it says asher yonas. So too, the pasuk Ayitish Mukayim, we can include as if it says yonas over there. Then, the Nisa Menisa. We learn that this pasuk that has yonas, from a different pasuk has yonas, and the Nisa Mikvul. In other words, we learn that this Nisa, which doesn't say Gvul, from another pasuk, which says Gvul, because it says Mikvul le'ir miklata asher yonas. So we learn that the other pasuk says Nisa, which includes our original pasuk as if it said Nisa, as if it also says Gvul. And then V'gvul mikvul, V'gvul mechutz. Meaning we learn out this Gvul, which doesn't say chutz, from another pasuk Gvul that does say chutz, where it says Umatzah Yisrael Adam michutz l'gvul. So we learn out that chutz from Gzeir Shava to the Gvul of Al Yitish Mukayim. And then we go b'chutz michutz. The chsev, where it says in the pasuk in Bamidbar, Madleisim mechutz le'eres pas kemo, you measure out of the city of the Levite cities, on the corners going to the east, Alpayim ba'ama v'goymer, 2,000 amas, etc. So this chutz, we learn from the chutz of the Madleisim chutz le'ir, where there it says Alpayim ba'ama. So going backwards in all these Gzeir Shavits, as if our original pasuk, Ayetzish Mukayim, as if it said the word Alpayim ba'ama, and that's how we know that you have Al Yisrael Mekayim means 2,000 amas. Fine. It says the Gemara, there's another pasuk. V'neilef mikir yivachutza elavama. The pasuk says the city of the Levim, they had 2,000 amas beyond them that you couldn't build, but there was a difference between the first 1,000 and the second 1,000 about being cultivated, about being built. But the pasuk says mikir yivachutza from the wall of the city outward elavama. 1,000 amas has one halacha. The next 1,000 had a different halacha. So one pasuk says on the outside is 2,000, but another pasuk says 1,000. So maybe learn that the Gzeir Shava from the Chutza. Well, here it says Chutz, here it says Chutza, here it says 2,000, here it says 1,000. Maybe learn from this pasuk that's 1,000, not 2,000. So if you want to know, don't Chutz michutz, those the selbe word. We learn not Chutz michutz. Maybe don't Chutz michutza. No, out from outside. So my mind not forgive me. What's the difference? Hatan Rabbi Shmuel, I could tell you a bigger chiddush. We had a famous brayso Hatan Rabbi Shmuel, which mentioned many times in Shas. It says in the pasuk, V'shava kain, the kain returns, and Muvah kain, the kain comes. Now, I'm not going to say everything Rashi said, but Rashi goes in a great lengthy here to explain. In Torah's Kainim, it's taught regarding the negi batim, the houses that have a nega. After the first week, they sequester, they put in quarantine, right? It's a Nyan Diyema, right? Of the first week, they don't know is this a nega or not. So it says the Shavak Kain Yevishvi, the Kain comes back on the seventh day, and he sees V'hini Pas HaNega. Look, the nega is spread out, Bekir Savais in the walls of the house, and it says, so what do? It says, they take apart the stones, and they peel off the plaster, and then they go and put other earth, and then they replaster the house. Now, so that the Brisa says over there, that how do you know a nega that didn't change the first week? It didn't spread. So the Kohen did not take apart the bricks. And then they wait a second week, and then by the second week it spread. How do you know that then you're going to go ahead and take apart the bricks and do like you did the first week, and you're not going to demolish it right away? Because it says, Uvaha Kohen, V'ro V'hini Pasam. So, as Rashi points out, although it says smashing it after that pasuk, but we learn from Gzeir Shava, where it says when it spread the second week, it says Uvah Kohen. And it says when it spread the first week, it says V'shava Kohen. We learn out Zui Shiva, Zui Pia. Coming back and coming is the same thing. In other words, just like over there, it says that you take apart the bricks and take apart the plaster and you give them another week. Also over here, when nothing happened after the first week, it stayed the same. And you give them a second week, and then it comes back, meaning it spreads, that then you can do the same thing, because it says the Shabbat kind of Vulcan. So one thing you see is that coming back and coming, they both mean the same thing. It's you waited after the week. Just the one is the first week and one is the second week. The first week is that you waited that week and you see it spread. Oh, so then you take it apart and you wait to see what happens. So the same thing is going to be the second week that you make Gzeir Shava. But one thing is that we don't hear the word Shiva and Bia. For sure, shouldn't care about Chutza and Chutzah. So I think Gemara says, you're right. We'll compare even words that mean the same thing, even if it's not even the same word, if there's nothing else that's similar. But if something that's similar, we'll learn it from that which is similar. If you have chutz, you learn it from chutz. If you have chutzah, you're not going to learn from chutzah. You're right. If you only have the shabbat kind of bar kind, even though they're different, you'll learn that one from the other. But here you have, and therefore that's how we know the 2,000 amat chol. Then we learned in the Mishnah, alpayim amagulas, right? Machlekes. The first opinion said the 2,000 amas that you get is going to be in a circle, which in some sense would make sense logically because you get 2,000 amas in every direction. That's how the circle gives you. Chum say no, we give you a square. We square it off. And therefore, you actually get the corners, which are going to be more than 2,000 amas. Says the Gemara, Reb Chanina take this. Manashach. Whatever it is that you want, it's difficult. If he holds Gzeir Shava, we mentioned before, regarding learning a muffin from Nisa and Chutz from Chutz and going all the way, as we said before. So Peis Ksivin, the pasuk over there that we learned at the 2,000 amas from by the Ari Levium, it says Pa'as. Pa'as means squared. You only get corners. That's the whole idea of corners is by a square. So then it should be squared. And Leslie Gzeir Shava, and if he doesn't have the Gzeir Shava, and that's why he doesn't have the squares, how does he know that 2,000 amas? Where does he get the tchum of 2,000 amas? Says he has the Gzeir Shava. But here it's different by the tchum of Shabbos, because the Amakar, the pasuk says over there about Midbar, by the Ari Levium, which is the source. We learn now it says the word Zed Yelehem Migrashei Aram. This should be for them the open area of the cities, which is what the halacha of squared was said by. Well, Zat and nice and payt. By the Ari Levium, that's where you give corners. But you don't give corners for those who are making the laws of Shabbos like Tchumen. And then you're going to give only circular. In other words, we have a miyut that tells us that Allah Payas is specifically, you have a Gzeir Shava. That's a new 2,000 amas. So why do you have the squares? Because the pasuk explicitly is coming to exclude, says the squares is only going to be by the laws of the Migrashei Aram and not by the Ar Levium. But Rabbanan, they would tell you, no, Tanakh in the Brayso, Kananyam, he says, The word zeh is not a miyut. It's kazeh you kol shef Shabbos. Zeh is saying like this, which is difficult to understand how you see that, but that's the saying zeh doesn't mean as a miyut. It's like this should be all those who have the laws of Shabbos too, which it will be squared just like you have by the Mikveh She'ar. Now, actually, based on this halacha of the Rabbanan, actually comes a very interesting halacha l'maisa. Amar Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says, if someone's carrying Dal Amas B'Shus Rabbim, you're not chayiv for Dal Amas. Until you carry Dal Amas with its diagonal, which is actually 5.6 amas, 5 3/5. You take 4 amas and you take 8/5 of an amma, which again is this 5.6 amas. That's how all Sheikhs Shabbos are, which you give corners. So now the thing is, when you're carrying a Shus Rabbim, there's no corners that to give a measurement and it's diagonal because it's linear, it's one-dimensional. You can't give squares. So essentially what we're saying is, you have to give the equivalent of the diagonal of a square of 4 amas. The shiur of Dalet amas has to have him malach zayin. So to be chayiv is not enough 4 amas. You have to carry 5.6 because there's a corner. Dalet amas has a leniency too. There's a stringency and there's a leniency regarding how we're measuring. To be chayiv carrying Dalet amas, you didn't carry the whole Dalet amas. You still have, because the corners gives you 5.6. So to be chayiv carry has to be not just Dalet, it has to be 5.6 ounces. Now, Amar Papa, he also continues on this thing and says, Badik Ban Rava tested us. Amid B'Shus Rabbim, if you have a pillar, a beam, a mailbox, whatever, something in B'Shus Rabbim, that's Kabbalah Yud Rach and Dalet, it's 10th of Mai and 4th of Mai, which generally makes something into Rishos HaYachid. But Tzarchim Balach Sainan, does it have to be 4 Tvachim square so that you have a diagonal? Because something that's circular, although it might be 4 Tvachim wide, doesn't have a diagonal. So does it have to be square to have diagonal too? Oiloi or not? Family, we said, what I mean? Al-Haini Rav Chananya, isn't this Allah Rav Chananya? The time of the Brayse, we mentioned before, Chananya says, because they use Kol Shefti Shabbos. All the laws of Shabbos have to have Aleph Sign, has to have payers. So therefore, it's not enough to be 4 Tvachim wide, it has to be 4 Tvachim square in its width. And therefore, if that thing is 4 Tvachim wide in a circle, it's not going to be as a Rishos HaYachid because it has to have 4 Tvachim, 4 has to be squared to be considered in the laws of Shefti Shabbos, whether 4 amas or 4 Tvachim, has to have the dimensions in a square to be considered as that domain. Now, we continue with the Halacha Mishnah. Here's where we get a little bit complicated.
Do you say the same thing about Beis Hasayim?
About Beis Hasayim,
does
that's
Beis
not...
Hasayim become bigger?
Well, we don't have the law of payas. Beis Hasayim is a good question. We don't have from the Beis HaMikdash, which actually...
Kol Shefti Shabbos.
Kol Shefti Shabbos. I hear it could be.
Beis Hasayim is a dimension. It's not necessarily going to have to be a square. Beis Hasayim could be long.
We had a machlekes. We had a machlekes tanoim if it has to be square or it could be double the amount about that.
The size of the length.
Beis Hasayim,
Yes.
there was a machlekes. If it's a square, it's because we had by the Mikdash. We say we take 70 2/3 that we make it as a square.
So
or
if it's a square, it's
No,
right.
the point
square
is
be in the middle.
the point is that every dimension you have becomes bigger.
Right, question, what's the parameters of the
So
shapes of
there's
Shabbos?
distance and there is a area dimension. So the distance, you're right, because you have to have that square in the middle. But if that's the size of the land, it could be in different shapes. So it's a machloikes. So according to one Damar, it doesn't make a difference.
Could be. So here we get a little bit complicated over here. It's actually worthy just to actually see the words of the Mishnah again to understand what we're about to say, because it is complicated. The whole of the base is this next part. Mishnah said in the Testament base that we started saying we had a few cases in the Mishnah. We said if you're coming on the road and it gets dark, you recognize a tree or a fence, and you say, I want my shoes to be tachtav. So then we said you didn't say anything. You say the ikaroi by the trunk. Okay, you designated a specific place 2,000 amas away from you. Then you go another 2,000 amas to where you are. Let's say you don't recognize the tree, or you're not baki balach, you don't know you could do such a thing. And you say, I want my shoes to be in my place. Then you get 2,000 amas in every direction. And it was machlekes if it's circular or it's square. Then the Mishnah says the following words. When this is what we said, it's not clear what this is going on. The ani is ma'ar barag. He can make an A with his feet. And that Rameir says, and that's only for an ani. And Yehuda disagrees, says no, it's or apply to an usher too. We only said ma'ar from the past as a leniency on the usher that he doesn't have to go with his feet, but the feet also is a leniency for is also the halacha for that of the usher. So again, we had in the Mishnah, as the Gemara quotes in the Mishnah, this is what we said, the ani makes his ear with his feet. Amr Meir says, Meir says, no, it's only for a traveler, because ani doesn't really mean a poor person. Ani means a traveler without food, someone that's traveling. Yehuda says, no, the halacha applies echad ani bechad usher. Even the usher doesn't really mean wealthy or poor, it means the guy's at home. Even the ani at home has food. It applies not only if you're on the road, but even if you're at home. Now, it's just important to point out what we're about to discuss. There's three ways of making an erev. You can make an erev what we call the pas, which it doesn't really mean bread, but it's muslin shtei. So there's 2 meals worth. Everyone can make an erev with pas. Then there's halacha mekoimi, in my place, with my legs, what's called baraglo. And then there's makom pleni, which is I'm not even there. I'm pointing out a place 2,000 amas away from where I am right now. Those are the 3 cases we're going to be discussing. So Amr Rav Nachman, we have a machlekes Amayram, how to qualify the machlekes Tanoim, and some of the terminologies and phrases we have in the Mishnah. Amr Rav Nachman, he says, machlekes, the machlekes we had in the Mishnah between Rabbi and Yehuda. That Rabbi Yehuda permits that even quote-unquote an usher, again, just keep in mind, usher doesn't mean usher, means a guy at home, to make an A with his feet, when he says, Shirisasu will be b'mekaymi. So if you recall, I'll call them case 1 and case 2. Case 1 was not b'mekaymi in my place. Case 1 was over there. I'm not complaining. Where the tree is, where the wall is. Their machlekes, if it's only for an ani with your raglav, was in my place right now. That's where the Mishnah said that that's where we were saying the Remeir holds it's only for the ani, and that's where the Rebbe says no, it's even for the ash. And as Rashi points out, when the Mishnah said "B'zehu sha'amru," and this is what we said ha'ani ma'ar baraglav, the Gemara is going to explain shortly what that's going on. Is that going on the case of what I call case 1, makra ilon, which you recognize a tree in Shrisasi b'makom pleni to be over there, or is it going on the enabaki, the guy who doesn't know you could do such a thing, and he's saying Shrisasi is b'mekaymi, in my place, in the, because we're going to try to figure out who's saying what in the Mishnah, which is in the second case, in my place. So we'll just read in the Gemara and then we'll look at it again on the chart just to see that everyone got it. So Rav Nachman says the machlekes was in case 2, b'mekaymi, in my place. There are Meir, so Meir holds ikar eruv b'pas. Meir holds the primary eruv is with your bread. That's the primary halacha. You're supposed to do it with your bread where your meal is, as you continue in days. Now, but ani, a poor person, again, which really means someone who's traveling on the road and he doesn't have bread with him, who the kilu rabban levei was a leniency for a poor person that he could say, I want my shlish to be in my place where I am right now with my feet, when he doesn't recognize the tree or the fence, or someone who does, but he says shlisasu b'makom pleni. That's where we made the leniency for the ani, al asher, but for the wealthy person again, meaning a guy who's at home, lo. No, he doesn't have either one of those leniencies. He can't say b'makom pleni, and he can't even do b'mekaymi. He can't even make an air with his own feet. You can't go there and be there. You have an opportunity to do with bread. You have to do with bread. There's only said for an ani, what we call a traveler. That's how Rameir holds. Rabbi Yehuda Saba, he holds, no, ikar berega. The primary air was with the feet. To say shvisasi tachti, where I am right now. And therefore it's echad ani ve'echad asher, therefore it's even for a wealthy person, meaning for a homeowner. If he goes out and he's there by ben hashmashes, that is the primary mitzvah of erev, as Rabbi Yehuda's words in the Mishnah were. He says we only said to make an erev with bread, only as a leniency. So we see that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the primary erev is with your regel. Now, that's their machlekes according to Rav Nachman. Now, al b'makom pleni, but when you say over there, which was case 1, which is by that tree, I'm not there. I want my erev to be there. Divrei hakoil, everyone would agree, even Rabbi Yehuda, only in Asher life. It's only for the traveler and not for the homeowner. Their machlekes was only regarding in your place. Could you do it with the foot or not? But over there, everyone's going to agree that's only for the traveler. Now, when the Mishnah said the words, the first words opening up before we even said Rabbi Yehuda, Zuhi Shamru, and this is what the sages said, that the ani makes his erev with his regel, which sounds like that's the primary takana. That sounds like that's not the primary takana, because we're saying that it's a leniency. This that they said ani ma'ar baraglav, which sounds like that's a leniency for the ani. Man katanila, who said that phrase? It's Remeir. He said that phrase because he's the one who holds the primary Eruv with the bread. And like a leniency, Ani Mar Baraglov, that's a leniency with Ani. And Va'ahaikoi, which case is this word of Bezuy Shabbat going on? A'ena Makar, on the guy who doesn't recognize a tree, or he's not so professional halacha, meaning, and he's saying case 2, he doesn't realize you could do it over there. He's saying, I want it to be Tachti, where I am right now. On that, they were saying that Zehu Sha'amu. In other words, even this case where you're doing it where you are, that was a leniency the Rabbanan said only for an Ani. And that's by the leniency of Baragla. Because that's not the primary Takana Erev, and therefore it's not going to be effective for the usher. The primary Takana Erev was to do it with the bread and not with your feet. Now, one more phrase we have to clarify. And when the mission ended off, and we didn't say that you make an Erev with bread, which sounds like that actually the primary Erev, when it was instituted, was with your regal. And I was saying, and they didn't say that you make it with bread, only to be a leniency on the wealthy person. So Man Kutani La, who's saying that final phrase in the Mishnah? That's Rabbi Yehuda. That is Rabbi Yehuda, because he's the one that holds the primary one was Beregel, and the past was only leniency on the wealthy person. So according to Nachman, it really reads pretty well. The first, there's a opening ambiguous statement, and there's an ending ambiguous statement. Who said that? Now, Ramey was the first opinion mentioned. Rabbi Yehuda was the second one, so it makes sense. The first ambiguous statement was Rameir, which was right before he said his opinion. And the last one, which was after Rabbi Yehuda, was Rabbi Yehuda who said that statement. That's one interpretation. Rav Chizda Amar, he gives a different interpretation. He says, Machlekes b'malkim ploini. The Machlekes of Rabbi Yehuda was the first case. In that place, where you don't have an Erev with bread, you don't have an Erev even with your feet. You're just saying, I want it to be over there. So you didn't bring bread over there, and you're not even there with your own feet. That's the case that they have Machlekes. Your mayor held on the Ein Shaloi. Oh, that's only going to work for the traveler, not for the homeowner. But Yehuda says, no, it's even going to work, not only for the traveler, even for the homeowner. That's where the Machlekes is. But in my place, where my feet are here, which is case 2, Divrei Hakol, and everyone, even Ramey would agree, not only for the poor person, not only for the traveler, but even for the homeowner. Why? Because according to Rav Chizda, everybody agrees that Erev Beregel, even Ramey, everyone agrees the primary Erev is with your feet. And therefore, Mekaimi is going to work even for the usher. Now, based on this, we have to have a different interpretation. Bezui Sha'amru, this, that the opening words that we said, and this is what the sages said, that Ha'ani Ma'ar Baraglov, wait, that sounds like that's not the primary Erev. That it's a leniency that was set only for the Ani. But wait a second, aren't you Rav Chizda saying that everyone agrees the primary Erev is Baraglov? Oh, Mankataneva. Wait a second, let me explain to you. Who said this line? Yes, like Rav Nachman also, it's Ramey who said this. Now, wait a second. But aren't we talking about that we're talking about the case of Misha Baba there, someone's on the road, and he recognizes a tree or a fence and he's saying, I want my shvisa to be over there by the trunk? Wait a second. That you told me that even according to Yehuda, that's not the primary mitzvah. The primary mitzvah is Baragla, where you are right now. Even so, we cannot say that that's going to be Yehuda. Because what does the word over there say? Bezusha Amru, that this is what the sage said, Ha'ani ma'ar Baragla. According to Yehuda, he would hold that halacha of Amir Ba'alma of the Ikaroi is not just the Ani, is even by the usher. So it must be Rameir. In which case is he going on? The first case in the Mishnah regarding someone who's going on the road and it's getting dark, and he recognizes a tree and he says, I want my shvisa to be by the trunk, which is case 1, then his shvisa is going to acquire for him, and that's what your mayor is saying. Oh, it's a leniency that was said only for an ani. When you're doing it shaloi b'makom, with just words. Again, that's because that's not the primary Erev. Because even according to Mayor in the Chiz's version, that he agrees that only that the Ikar Erev is Baraglo, but that's only b'makom in my place. But to do b'makom, that was what they only did for an ani. But Yehuda holds that no, even an usher, meaning a homeowner in his house, and he says, I want my shvisa to be at the end of 2,000 amas. Even by him, they were lenient. Even though the primary Erev is in your place, they also give the leniency to the homeowner to do it b'makom. Now, based on this, the end statement that says in the Mishnah, they didn't say to make an Erev with bread, which sounds like that the Iker Erev is not with bread, and they only said El Lahakal as a leniency on the wealthy person, that's what it was instituted for. So based on this, Rav Chisda Makadamil, who said it, is Divrei Hakol. It's going like everybody. And it's not just the conclusion of Rabbi Yehuda's statement, because Rabbi Yehuda, because your mayor, according to Rav Chisda's version, also agrees that the primary Erev is with Regel, B'Mekaymi, and that bread was only as a leniency on the wealthy person. So again, just to look at this again, to review, we said B'Pas, okay, everyone agrees you can make Erev with bread. Mekaymi, Rav Nachman said that that's the machlekes Yomei and Yehuda. But Mekaymi, with Regel, Yomei says no. A usher cannot make an Erev with his Regel because the primary Erev is with Pas. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Echad on Echad Usher, because the Iker Erev is Beregel. So, usher, if the Iker Erev is Beregel, could also do an Erev B'Mekaymi. Now, based on that, Rav Nachman said, if let's say B'Mokim Pleni, which is, again, we have 3 different types of Erev, in that place, by the tree, so everyone would agree, Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, that that was all leniency only for Ani and not for an usher. That was Rav Nachman's interpretation. Rav Chisda said differently. He says, no. Regarding Mekaymi in my place, but what we call Baraglov, so that actually everyone agrees that Echad Ani ve'Echad Asher, even Rameh, because everyone agrees Iker Erev is Beregel. Not like Rav Nachman says Rameh holds Iker Erev Bepas. Everyone agrees Iker Erev Beregel, so that's going to work. The Machlekes was B'Mokim Pleni, what we call case 1. That's where Rabbi is going to say even a usher, unlike Rav Nachman's version, and this is important to keep out cup because the Gemara is going to try to bring rise to Rav Nachman. And we're going to have to remember what exactly does Rav Nachman and Rav Chisda disagree on. It's 2 points. First of all, on Rav Meir, regarding if he holds usher yes or not b'Mekaymi, and also b'Mokim Pleni, Rav Nachman holds, Rabbi Yehuda agrees b'Mokim Pleni, usher is not going to work. But according to Rav Chisda, he says no, that is the case that they disagree regarding, and that Rav Meir holds only Ani and usher not, because this Erev is, even though Iker Erev is, this is a typo. It's not Iker Erev Bepas, it's Iker Erev Beregel, it shouldn't say that. But even though it's Beregel, but that was only B'Mekaymi, not B'Mokim Pleni. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that no, even for the usher, you could go ahead and make his Erev B'Mokim Pleni. It's not just a leniency for the honor. Says Gemara, Tani Kapasei Rav Nachman. Let's bring a brisa that supports Rav Nachman. And as Rashi points out, what point are we bringing a right to Rav Nachman? He said the whole machlekes was B'Mekaymi, in my own place, meaning that even where the person says, in my place where I am right now, according to Meir, it's not going to work for the wealthy person. And moreover, a second point, Rabbi Yehuda only permitted the usher b'Mekaymi, but b'Mokim Pleni, Rabbi Yehuda agrees, it's not going to work for the usher. Where do we see this? From the following brisa. Echad Ani ve'Echad Asher ma'arim b'Pas, says the brisa, whether you're a traveler or homeowner, you can make an Erev with bread. Now, the say usher, however, a wealthy person, a homeowner, cannot go out chutz l'tchum, the Yom is also to come and say that I want my streets to be in my place. Now Rashi points out the words chutz tchum are not precise. It obviously not going out of your tchum. It would mean b'seif tchum. And he says that if the words are precise, chutz tchum, it means but with a daled amas, because your shvisa gives you another daled amas. Be that as it may, it's at the end of 2,000 amas. The wealthy person cannot do that. Because they did not say this halacha make an Erev with your own feet, even when you're doing it b'Mekaymi. Only if someone is traveling and it's getting dark. That's different Meir, where we see that according to Meir, even b'Mekaymi, it's only the Ani and not the usher. That's like Rav Nachman, not like Rav Chisda. That's point number 1. Continue the brisa. He says, no, no, whether the traveler, whether the homeowner, they can make an Erev with their feet. The Yetzi Asher chutz l'tchum, and yes, the wealthy person could go if he wants to with his feet out the tchum. The young man, he can say, I want my shvisa to be in my place. So you see point number 2. According to Yehuda, he only permits the wealthy person b'Mekaymi in his own place, but meaning like not shaloi b'Mekaymi. He says he allows the usher to do it here. We're saying the thrust of Yehuda's opinion that he's the more lenient, more great opinion. He says, what could the wealthy person do? He could get up with his feet and he could go there. That's what he could do, but he can't do shaloi b'Mekaymi. That's like a Nachman, not like Rav Chisda's version. And says Rabbi Yehuda, this is the primacy of what the Erev is, which is with your feet, and therefore apply the same thing with a wealthy person. The Tir Chachamim, it's just that the sages actually gave a permissibility, a balabayas, to the homeowner that he could send his Erev. Yadavda, in the hand of the servant, B'Abinai, by his son, B'Shluchah, with his agent, B'Shluchah to be leniency. But again, its Iker Erev is Beregel even according, meaning that the Iker Eretz Beregel according to Rabbi Yehuda. And again, we see from this brace of both points, we see Rabbi Meir holds only an Oshalai b'Mekayim, not like a Chizah. We also see that, like Rav Nachman, that the dispensation we give for a wealthy person is only b'Mekayim according to Rabbi Yehuda, but not Shalai b'Mekayim, not like Rav Chizah who said that you can have Echad Ani v'Echad Osher even Shalai b'Mekayim. Now the Brisa continues, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, it just comes to prove his opinion. It says, Ma'aseh ba'anche beis Mamel. There was a story with the people of Beis Mamel, or ba'anche beis Gurion ba'arema, the people of the Beis Gurion in Arema, which is the name of a place. Shoyim achalkin gregors. They used to give out dried figs, b'tzimoikin, and dried grapes, which dried up and became like raisins, la'aniyim, to poor people, b'shnei b'tzaris, in a hungry year, in a famine year. Now, uboyin ani kfar shichem. So the paupers of the village of Shichem, they would come, the ani kfar kananya, and the paupers of the villages of Shichem, which was near Arema, within 4,000 amos. What they would do is, now they're out of the Tchum. They were within 4,000, but more than 2,000. So what the poor people used to do is they would go before Shabbos, they would go to the Tchum and spend the Shkia, Ben Hashmash is there, so that Lamachers, Mashkim the Bain. The next day they would get up and then they would go because they did their Ani Mar Baraglov by 2,000 amos. Now one thing we see, and this is the Raya, says Rabbi Yehuda to his opinion, you obviously see Iker is Beregel and B'Mekayim. Now, wait, Rashi points out, what are you talking about? Aren't these people Aniyim? No. When they're home, they're considered like a shiur. Because it's not possible, says Rashi, that even an Ani doesn't have 2 meals worth in his house. And still we see that they went and they made an Erev with their feet, and they stayed there for Friday night. That's an Erev B'Mekayim. That is, like Rav Nachman, that Mashiach al Tchum was said regarding Erev, even for wealthy people. Because that's what these people did. They had bread in their house, and even so it was permitted that to go ahead and be Ma'arev, B'Raglov, you see, like says Rabbi Yehuda, that the Salacha, that the Ha'ani, even an usher can be Ma'arev, B'Raglov. Now, that was one right to Rav Nachman. Rav Ashi says, Mastik Namadeki says, a precise reading of our Mishnah also indicates, like Rav Nachman, that according to Yehuda, B'Mokim Pliny, in that place, does not work for an usher. The only place he disagreed with Meir was B'Mekayim. That's like Rav Nachman, not like Rav Chizah, because it said that the Machlekes was actually Shalei B'Mekayim, and that would work even for the usher according to Yehuda there. We can see from the Mishnah, the next Daf, which is called our Mishnah, that no, usher Shalei B'Mekayim is not going to work even according to Yehuda. Why? Because the Mishnah says like this: Misha Yatsa, someone even went out of his house just a little bit, and he already got into the car. He started just traveling a few feet, and he went out. He went out to go to a city that's close enough to his city within 4,000 amos that a person could go through an Erev to that other city. But his friend told him to come back. He said, "It's too hot. It's too cold. As we'll see on the next daf." So his friend brought him back. So what's the halacha? Says the Mishnah, "Who mutalef?" Tomorrow, that person who started going, he can go to that next city on Shabbos, but the rest of the city members cannot go. That's a good view. Now, Vaviba, we asked the question, as we'll see this on the next daf, what's the between him and them? He was going to be the shliach for them, so what's the difference that he started going and his friend told him to come back? Why is he different than them? It's a little complicated, we'll see in the next daf. The Puna says, what are we talking about here? We're talking about this guy who started going. He actually has 2 houses, one in the city that he started to leave, and one that he was going towards. Now, as Rashi explains, this guy actually wanted to go to his house in the other city from before Shabbos and to spend Shabbos over there. Now, he didn't go out with the intention of acquiring his shvisa at the end of the tchum and to come back. His intention was to go there, but his friend told him to come back. And you have 2 tchum of Shabbos between the 2 cities, meaning 4,000 amos. This guy, since he already started going on the road, because of traveling, not to be ma'arid b'raglov, this is a little bit confusing, but it's a very simple idea. When you're going out, and then you get taken back, the guy tells you to come back, what were you going out for? Were you traveling to get to your other house in the other city? Then you're an ani. were you going because I just wanted to be there, Ben Hashmashas, to be there by the Tchum? That's being Ma'ar Barag Law. You're not necessarily an Ani. You could be an Usher who's being Ma'ar Barag Law. So this guy, he was traveling. He wanted to go to the other city. Havale Ani. So quote unquote, it doesn't mean he became a pauper. He said Ani really means the traveler. So he could say, I want my shvisa to be at the end of the tchum, if he recognized the specific designated place. And Rashi points out, even if he didn't say this, since we could presume it's called a non-sahabi that he wanted to go there, it's like he said this. So and Rashi says you have to say it's talking about where he didn't say anything. First of all, because we don't see anywhere in the Mishnah that he says Shvisasim Makom. Moreover, the fact that we'll see in the next Mishnah, Meir disagrees and he says, no, the guy's a Chamer Gamel. Obviously, he didn't say Shvisasim Makom because Meir himself agrees if he would have said Shvisasim, if he would have said I want to be there, that then he's an Ani, and the Meir would agree with that halacha. And they're going to say no, Meir considered him as an usher because he only started traveling a little bit, and that's not going to make him an Ani, which is a traveler. And if you're considered an usher, there is Chamer Gamel, and the reason why it's Chamer Gamel is because he didn't want to be in his house. Because he said Shvasasi is going to be there, but he can't be there either because he's not an Ani, and therefore he can't move from his place. And Rebbe doesn't say that. Rebbe says he's a Chamer Gamel. Obviously, we're talking about he didn't say anything, and Rebbe also considers him as an Ani, but because he didn't say anything, as we'll see this in the next daf, so Rebbe is in doubt if his intention was to acquire Shvis at the end of the Tchum, or maybe from the fact that the guy called it back, he changed his mind, and he didn't plan on going there anymore, and therefore he intended to have a Shvis in his house, and therefore he's a Chamer Gamel. But one thing is, Shmami no, you see like Rav Nachman. Why do you see like Rav Nachman? Because the Havali Ani, the Hanach Ashir Nino. The other people in the city, they're quote unquote Ashir, meaning they're still home. So even if they say we want Shvisas and Makam Plaini, they're going to be forbidden. And as Rashi says again, it has to be they didn't say anything because even if they said, he says. Because if they didn't say, obviously it wouldn't work. We say even if they say Shvisas and Makam Plaini. Alma says the Gemara, called the Makam Plaini, whatever is over there in that place, only in, this is Rabbi Yehuda, as recorded from the Mishnah over there. It's only by the traveler, Ashulai, not by the homeowner. And Rashi says that's why we said that it has to be that this guy has two houses. Because if he didn't have a house over there, we wouldn't say that when he doesn't say anything, it's like he did say he wants to go over there, because maybe he really changed his mind. Shema Mina, what we see from this is that the halacha is like Rav Nachman for the next Mishnah, that Rabbi Yehuda himself, b'makom plaini, what's he saying? Only in Ashulai. Where do you see this? It's a little bit complex.
Why
but
in
it's
this case doesn't work with shlichus? Why can't we say shlichus? If you're already then there.
right, because we'll see this on the next time exactly what is the exact case. But to simplify it, let's imagine that he's not the shliach. And let's say they said, we want to also have like he's doing. They even said, they verbalized, we want to have our shvisa at the end of the tchum. He didn't say anything, the way Rashi explained. He didn't say anything. So he's going, and he went a few feet, and he got brought back. So because he has a house in the other city, he was a traveler. A traveler is quote unquote this ani. Ani says to Yehuda, he could do shvisas and makam plaini. So even though he didn't say anything, we're assuming he would want it to be over there because he's traveling. The usher, the people at home, even if they say we want to be makam plaini, it's not going to work. So you see like Rav Nachman's interpretation, that Rabbi Yehuda, who's the more lenient interpretation, not like Rav Chizda. Chizda said no, echad ani ve'echad usher, that it would work. No, you see the other people in who the rest that usher like. It only works for the guy who has a house over there, who's a traveler, who it works for him as an ani. And says the Gemara, he was teaching this halacha kamei Rav, and he said, reviewed his opinion of echad ani ve'echad usher, that it's whether for a traveler or even a homeowner that he can arve with his regal. Rav said that sign banami he shows to conclude halacha Rabbi Yehuda, which is like Rav Nachman's version, which is specifically b'mekaymi, and that's where we have a halacha. Halacha is Rabbi Yehuda, again, not for this, like Chizda, but that this halacha b'mekaymi b'ragla works not just for ani, but even for ash. And the Gemara ends over a story related to this. He used to go from Artivna every single Shabbos, La Pumpadisa, like one of these Rabbanim, they have to travel very far to get to their Akila, and they get up in the Mizrah, and he would say, Erev Shabbos, he would sit in his house, And he would say, I want my Shabbos residence should be in Tzintza, which was a specific place between those two Trumen, so they can go 4,000 amos. Abai said to him, my taita, what's your understanding? You're quote unquote an usher. You're home. You think you want the shvis to be complaining in that place. Rabbi Yehuda, so even if you're going to say, when you have Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda, halach Rabbi Yehuda, that he's lenient, and he says even for an usher like you that you're home. But Rav Chizda and Rav Chizda says Machlekes complaining. Yeah, Rav Chizda says that the Machlekes is in such a place, and that you're going with that leniency of Rav Chizda, of Rabbi Yehuda, that even if you're usher, you're going to be complaining. But the problem is, Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says Rabbi Yehuda doesn't permit. In this case of B'Mokaplein, he only permits it B'Mekaymi, and the Tanya Kavasei, and we brought Bryces like Rav Nachman previously to prove his opinion. So Malay, he says, I retract. You're right, I can't do that anymore. The Erev has to be, I would have to go down and do it B'Paz, because, or B'Regel, but you can't do B'Mokaplein as an Usher. Something to discuss in today's Daf Yomi in Aleph. We had from the Mishnah, we said that if you do the Shvisa B'Ikarai, where you Messiah, you define exactly where it is, so that's going to be effective. You can go 4,000 amas when Shabbos starts. Now, but the Gemara qualified and said, it's only if you could run and you would reach the trunk, then it's going to work. And then we mentioned parenthetically that if the guy who doesn't recognize could give over his Shvisa, the guy who recognizes it, and he says, our Shvisa should be in that place. Then we discussed Allah from the Mishnah that said that if a guy is not Makar, he doesn't know about the tree or whatever, so he requires 2,000 amas in his place. Where do we know this from? So the pasuk Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Yidden in the Midbar Shu Ish Tachtav, which we said that's when you're what's called Chutz L'Tchum, when you don't have any Shvisa. Then you get an Erev Amas, that we know as we said in the previous stuff. How do you know 2,000 amas? Because it says Ayitzish Memukayim. How do you know Memukayim is 2,000 amas? We learn from multiple layer of Gzeir Shah. Makam, from Nisa, from Gvul, from Chutz. And because it says and there it says Alpayim Ba'ama. So that's how we know going backwards, as if it said over here, Mekaimai, as if it said 2,000 amas. I want to learn from the other half of the pasuk that says Mikir v'chutza elef ama. There it's only 1,000. No, we're going to chutz from chutz. We're going to chutz from chutza. Says the Gemara, wait a second. What do you mean? Because it has one letter different? Here we have the word b'shava kain, we have a vav kain. We learn that one from the other regarding the laws of how we do negabatim. That's only when you don't have something else similar. Then we could compare because it means the same idea. But if you have one with chutz and one with chutzah, we're going to do with the more precise one of chutz and not learn from the one that says chutzah. Then the second half of the daf was, according to the Mishnah, we had a machlekes regarding, before that. First we had a machlekes regarding if the 2,000 amas are circle or square. Now, the question was regarding the Gzeir Shabbat, is it total even for the squaring? Or do you say, no, this of Payas is only for the Mikdash Armor because it says Zeh, which tells you only for that. Or do you say, no, it's B'chol Shor Shabbos, it's Kazeh, and that would include all the laws of Shabbos. And based on that, we said the liability of carrying the Amas of Shabbos has to be Baal Simon, which we said has to be 5.6 Amas, and so too when you have a beam in Trisram to be Rosh Hashanah, it's only when you have Hein Baal Simon has to be a square. Then the last half of the daf was the Mishnah, we had a machlekes, if an usher, which is the Balabayas, a homeowner of someone's home, could be an Har Barag Levanat. Now we had a machlekes Amiram regarding this machlekes. First interpretation, that of Rav Nachman, was the machlekes was b'mekaymi, in my place, which we call case 2, which is a more classic case. So then the question is, do we say no, the Erev is with bread, and it's only being for poor people, or do we say no, to the contrary, Erev with bread, and of course it would be even for a usher. But the case of Makam Ploini, which is with Amir Ba'alma, that's at a distance, so then everyone would agree that it's only by an ani. And when it says in the Mishnah, Bezu Sha'amru, which we're saying that's Dafka by ani, that's Reb Meir, because, he says that's a leniency for ani, because Ikar Erev would pass. He holds Ikar Erev would pass. So, and that's going in the case of Einamakar, where he's doing Shrisasi Tafti in my place, what's called Makaymi. And that, specifically by ani. And when the Mishnah ended off and says, and we didn't say the halacha of Erev with bread only as a leniency, that's what Yehuda, because he actually holds Ikar Erev is Berekel, and therefore bread is a leniency for the usher. That's interpretation number 1. But Chizda, however, said a different interpretation. He says, no, the machlekes was b'makom plain, in the most lenient, in the most expansive one of even at a distance, what's called Amir. That's what the machlekes is. But when we claim me, then everyone agrees even by usher, because everyone agrees Ikar Erev is Beregel, even Reb Meir. Then when it says in the Mishnah, Bezusha Amru, which sounds like, yeah, it's only for Ani, yeah, that's your mayor, but that's going on the case of Shabbat Baderech, where he's saying Bi Karai at a distance with Amira. Oh, that's specifically for the Ani, where you're doing it in another place, and that's going like your mayor, because the Yehuda holds a bunch of chizit, even when complaining is going to work. And then when the Mishnah ended off, it says, and we didn't say the leniency of bread, and it's only as a leniency, that's going according to everyone, because everyone agrees according to our wisdom that Iker, Eruv, is Beregel, and therefore, yeah, it would work even for an usher, even for Mekaymi. So therefore, if we're saying that the halacha bread, that was as a leniency. Then the Gemara brought a brisa, Kavasei, of the Rav Nachman, who, again, as Rashi points out, that he says the machlekes is b'mekaymi, that even when he says mekaymi, Reb Meir would hold that it would not work for an usher. And that's point one. Point two is also, that according to Yehuda also, the permissibility of usher is only b'mekaymi, but b'makom pleni, no, it's not going to work for the usher. That we learned in the brisa, and then we said that the Mishnah in the coming daf also is precisely like Nachman. That according to Yehuda, b'makom pleni is not going to work for an usher. The whole machlekes under Meir was b'mekaymi. Where do we find that? Because we said someone that has a house in another city, it's as if he's an ani, because we're assuming that he's traveling. He's not going to be an arbaragla, he's on his way to his house. And therefore, even though he didn't say it, we could presume, Anan Zahadi, that he would have wanted to get there, and therefore he really is having in mind that his Erev should be b'seifat chum, and even though he never got there, he could do it b'mokum pleni, because he's an ani. But the rest of the people in the city, they're like, quote unquote, like the usher, so therefore for them, even if they verbalize it, it's not going to help them b'mokum pleni. So obviously you see, whenever you say b'mokum pleni, even according to Yehuda, who that's the halacha of the Mishnah on the next half, and we're quoting his opinion, that it's only ani that's going to work, but usher not, which again, that's the guy who started traveling, him, we give it to him, b'mokum pleni, but the rest of the city, they were considered, so to speak, a usher, and for them, it's not going to work, and that's how the Gemara brought that they ruled Lamaisa, that even according to Yehuda, to say b'mokum pleni is only for an ani, but the guy who is home, Erev Shabbos, and he wants it to be in that place, usher the Beisai, even according to Yehuda, it's not going to work, because Nachman, not going to fix it. Thank you for any time for hosting us.